morning. Good morning. We've
Good morning, everyone. How are you today?
witches this morning.
Oh, goodness gracious. That has been a fun morning of just randomness, I feel like.
We'll blame it on a public holiday in Queensland.
It's a public holiday in Queensland, and I feel like the streaming services had decided today was their public holiday as well.
Yeah.
So we have been here chatting in the back end, everybody, but now we're live on Facebook and all across all the streaming channels ready for our bite-sized conversations. It's so good to be here. And I should probably do the intro. So hi, I'm Jenni, everyone who is joining us for the first time. I'm from Elephant in the Room Consulting, and I'm very excited to join Kylie Mowbray-Allen, my digital BFF, for our bite-sized conversations every Friday morning at 9:15, New South Wales time, 8:15 in Brisbane today.
Awesome.
How are
great
you today?
Jenni. I'm great. How are you?
It's been a really good week. The weather has been so muggy and disgusting because it's getting into summer and it's that kind of terrible stickiness. But I've had an amazing week. I spent the first time this week planting trees and painting rocks with amazing people up in central Queensland, and then spending the rest of the week hanging out with my family and doing lots of fun things.
Jenni, what's so amazing that we're only 2 hours away from each other, and yet the difference between our lives due to, New South Wales, still we can't really go anywhere and do anything and all of that. And whenever I see your posts and you're flying here and doing this and going to a wedding and out and about, I'm like, wow, we're literally so close, yet living such different experiences.
Completely different. No, I know. It's insane.
We're really hoping that they open the border soon. It's a bit beyond a joke.
At the moment, I feel like Australia is starting to feel like a large version of Europe with 7 or 8 different locations and countries that all live by their own rules and have their own arrangements and decide sometimes to open their borders to each other.
Yeah, it's a funny business. I think we need some different languages, perhaps.
I believe that. I live in Queensland. I think we already do.
So, Jenni, I'd like to share a big announcement right now in social media world, not social media marketing world, but social media world of not all social media platforms, but particularly around Facebook, etc. So Facebook has a new name, and that new name is Meta. Now, it's actually, so I'm just going to read it out, what Mark Zuckerberg put out there. So the company's apps and brand names stay the same. So, for example, we still call Facebook and Messenger and WhatsApp, etc. But the new North Star is to help bring the metaverse to life. So the company will be metaverse first, not Facebook first. So what he has said in his Connect 2021 live streaming event, it says from now on, we will be metaverse first, not Facebook first. That means that over time, you won't need a Facebook account to use our other services. I think that's amazing. I know a lot of people that don't want to use Facebook, but I'm trying to get them using Messenger. And, Messenger is such a great platform. So it's really annoying that, they have to set up Facebook when they actually don't want anything to do with it. So that's a really cool thing. So he says, as our new brand starts showing up in our products, I hope people around the world come to know the Meta brand and the future that we stand for. He says, I used to study classics, and the word meta comes from the Greek word meaning beyond. And for me, it symbolizes that there's always more to build and there's always a next chapter to the story. And I often talk, Jenni, as do you, about evolving your brand. So this is a great example of that. He says, ours is a story that started in a dorm room and grew beyond anything we imagined into a family of apps that people use to connect with one another, to find their voice, and to start businesses, communities, and movements that have changed the world. Wow. So I'll put a link there into the chat with his letter, and you can watch the replay of that. But pretty extraordinary, huh?
That is crazy, and it's such a bold move. And we were talking about how you do this brand evolution a couple of weeks ago, but it's such an incredibly bold move and shows the influence or the perceived influence that he thinks Facebook or him as a business owner has to be able to make this huge wholesale change essentially in the brand and still know that people will follow each of the individual brands. It's such an incredibly brave move for the company because so many other companies have tried something like this and failed. So it'll be really interesting to see how it's received over the next couple of months.
I like the fact then that Facebook won't be the face and name of it, that it will actually be a company separate to that. So then Facebook will be its standalone platform, and Instagram its so instead of it always being said that, you know, Facebook owns Instagram, it's like, no, Instagram is just one of their many platforms that they have. But for me personally, what I've taken out of that, my most exciting bit is that to have all those other things, you don't have to be part of Facebook. So I think that's cool, and I'm really hoping it makes a difference.
And it's him listening to his audience, isn't it? It's him recognizing that actually the feedback, and there has been such a feedback and pushback on things like Facebook and Messenger, and it's a really good example for us with, you know, with our child, with my child, is that, you know, we don't want them on Facebook because they're too young, and we don't want them to be exposed to that whole social media piece. So we've created that kids messenger account so they can chat, but that actually has limitations to itself. So because they had to have a Facebook app beforehand and it has to be linked to a Facebook account, having a standalone things like Messenger is really great for kids to be able to start communicating and find a really secure way to communicate with their friends without having to, you know, worry about the social media at such a young age.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. Jenni, sorry for my rustling around, but I dropped my tea bag into my thermos. I was just trying to do a discreet little grab my bits, but anyway.
So we've had a really funny week this week, haven't we? Because I've been talking before we caught up with, and this is actually, this metaverse and this idea of changing to meta is actually a really interesting point in time, because we were going to talk about when is it a time to grow your business. And it's interesting because essentially we look at what Facebook's done and think, oh, what Mark Zuckerberg's done, and gone, oh, you know, it's just a new ploy. But what he's really doing is setting up a new empire, setting up his business and growing on an exponential level. So he's gone from saying, this is my company and these are the business units, to saying we have a whole new company and then 4 or 5 individual companies that sit underneath them that are all responsible to their own kind of vision and mission and staff. And it actually allows him now to manage this overall company structure and actually change the priorities based on how the market responds, how he wants to grow, and also produce new products that will actually align rather than be in competition with.
Absolutely. And Mari Smith, who is the Facebook queen, she said, what do you think about it? There's lots of possibilities like metaverse, meta apps, meta AI, meta avatar, meta humans. It's like, what's coming at us?
It's pretty crazy. And look, we have those already. Look, you have your little avatars and your emoji and your kind of your own versions of yourself that we're starting to do. So a lot of those things have already been started to happen anyway. But this is really now just putting a structure around it, isn't it?
Yeah, so I liken it to like an umbrella. So there is the fabric part of the umbrella is metaverse now, and then underneath, or meta, is it metaverse? Did I just say
just meta? Oh
no, he says we will be metaverse first, not Facebook first. Yeah, but that's a little bit confusing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, so I think of that like the fabric for the umbrella, and then all the bits that come off it are, you know, the extra little sidelines or companies or businesses or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, it's a fascinating way of doing it. And I've got a couple of clients who have sort of operate their businesses like that too, where they've got like a mothership in a way, and then all the little bits that come off it. So intriguing. And so you're right, as we talk about when is the right time to grow, etc., he will have had this in the pipeline for a very long time. Like what happened for me when I went from changing the name from Knick Knack Nappy Wrap to Knick Knack to then to Rainbows and Clover. It was a little evolve, and then it was a boom, big evolve. But I gave it a year to do its organic evolving. So I didn't immediately change the labels that were sewn on things, you know, and pull them all off or whatever, you know. I just did a slow evolve, which felt right. And then we made an announcement. So I think often a soft launch can be quite good before a big fat hard launch.
Oh, I think the soft launch, people underestimate the value of a soft launch, of just slowly sharing your product to the market or sharing your brand change to the market to get some reflection, to get some feedback, to see what people are saying and seeing who it's resonating with. Because when you do that soft launch and changing the name ever so slightly or even quite significantly, but do it in a quiet way, you start to actually connect with new audiences. And so you can actually see where the new brand is actually going to take you. So before you actually want to do the big launch and the full full kind of wholesale change to the business, you can start to say, well, actually, here's a new audience that weren't actually part of our previous brand, but because we've tweaked the name, because we've changed the way we're approaching things, we've now got a whole new audience sector. So actually, when you launch, it helps you inform your marketing, it helps you inform the channels that you may go through, but also it allows you to set up your structure again in a much more planned way, rather than just assuming that what you had before will work in the new company.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. So, Jenni, we were talking before we jumped on today about, and we also mentioned last week about how for both of us, our teams are growing. And so great opportunity to talk about how do you know when is the right time to bring in a staff member and how do you go about it? And recently I had Karen Hillen from my HR partner as a guest speaker on Positive Passionate Businesswomen, talking about all the bits and pieces that people don't even realize, whether you have an offshore staff member or a local staff member, etc. There's so much that needs to be looked at in terms of company culture documents and sharing, so that you're all on the same page, so that also if problems arise, you've got systems in place to be able to deal with it. So basically managing expectations, but right from the very beginning, having agreements and just clear understandings, but also really important, particularly when you've got remote teams, that you have regular catch-ups. So you're not all just out there floating on your own little island, so that you still feel part of a team. So when do you feel is the right time for you? Because I know for me, often I've only thought about, we need to expand our team when we're literally, flapping around like little duck legs under the water and go, wow. But in a perfect world, I think we actually need to be looking at our forecasting and going, right, the next 3 months, for example, we've got some really big growth plans in place. So actually, let's put someone in place so that we can take the time to train them up properly and bring them on board. But what are your thoughts around that?
I think it's a bit of both. And as you say, I think it's about forecasting and planning. I like to be a good planner and schedule things. So at the moment, most people will say, well, I can't afford to have someone new, so I won't hire anybody because I'm at that point where I've just got enough and the revenue's enough and the cash flow's enough that I can cover myself or my staff that I have, but I can't stretch it enough to that next person. That's actually the point where you start having the conversations. When you feel yourself starting to get busier, but you think you're at that pinch point of, can I afford it? Well, now we know we hate that term, can I afford it? But can the business cover the cost? Often what you're looking at is the cost benefit of your time. So for someone like you or I, where we're coaches and we're essentially paid for our time in some respects, and not necessarily by the hour, but there's a value around our hourly rate. So when your hourly rate is starting to get significantly higher than the volume of work, that's the time to say, well, maybe it's time to bring someone else who is technically good at the administration or the scheduling or the planning, so I can do the face-to-face delivery. That allows me to freeze me up, and then actually that creates opportunity, because my time is then spent maybe 10 hours away from admin and I get 10 hours at my coaching rate, in which case that immediately is going to pay for that 10 hours of new staff. So when you actually, there's a physical kind of, I'm under pressure, I just can't do it, need to hire someone and we'll work it out later. But there's actually that conscious discussion to say, I know that I can get paid I can get charged out for a better term. I can sell more product if I'm not having to do these things. And then you say to yourself, how much do you think I can sell if I had 10 hours a week back? And when I've had that conversation with clients to say, well, if you released yourself 1 day a week from doing admin, what do you think you do in that time? And they said, well, look, I could probably run another coaching program, or I could actually do 3 coaching sessions in that day, or I could do this work. And I said, cool, well, how much would that give you as a revenue? And they might say that might be $1,000 or $3,000 or $10,000 if it's a big coaching program for 1 day. And I say, okay, so if you had that 1 day off and were able to do that, could you afford another VA? Could you afford to hire an administration assistant? Could you afford to hire a marketing manager to do your work? And they're like, actually, I could. So it's actually recognizing that by releasing your time and recognizing the value of your time for the business, not just you, this is the business cost. Because the reality is what we decide we're charging ourselves out at is our notional fee, right? It's what the market will pay. But it's a cost benefit analysis of the business. So for me, we just grew. We just grew. We've gone from, we had the amazing Macy, who's been with me for almost a year now and has been incredibly and able to release me. And so by having Macy on board and it's supporting me, My business has doubled this year. And so we've just got something, which is incredible.
Jenni and Macy.
Which is amazing. And in the next month, because we've actually now got an amazing new starter, so Brian, and we've now got Kelsey on board who's supporting me and one of my other clients, we know that by having them on, I can actually now let go of a lot of stuff because I know Macy will make sure that that's coordinated because I trust Macy implicitly. So it comes to trust and culture, so stuff that Karen definitely spoke about. So now I know that I can think of all the amazing opportunities that now I can work on because I'm not worried about administration. Have I done this email? Have I sent that? Have I done this follow-up? We'll have a team to do that for us. So it's looking at what we can achieve now, but then actually imagining and wondering, what would we achieve if we just had 3 hours, 5 hours, 20 hours a week back? If that opportunity is huge, that's the time where you go, I'm going to lean in, I'm going to find a way to find this money. I'm going to reduce my salary maybe for a month to pay for someone because I know that'll pay off within the next couple of months.
So it's about being brave, I think.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And going,
100%.
You know what? I know I can do this. And because you've got someone else's life at stake, it's their livelihood too. So you know you've got to meet those, obligations every single week or month or however you pay. But yeah, being brave enough to say, I am determined to make this business grow. And I know that with support and help, that's pretty much going to be the only way that I can make that happen because I don't have any more hours in my week. You don't either. So by having support staff to help us do what we do best is just vital to growth. So I am always intrigued by those people that constantly say, can't afford it. And I'm kind of like, you really can't afford not to.
100%. And I think that's the conversation people have. There's two parts of that. People like to feel busy. The reality is we've created this connection with busyness, saying how cool am I because I'm so busy all the time. And I don't particularly want to automate my business because for me, the face-to-face connection or the conversation connection is actually what I deliver and what I love to do. So I'm not looking to fully automate, in which case I could sit back drinking lattes all day. Not that I drink coffee, but if I did, and something else happens. I want to have connections with my client. So if my business is about me providing impact and change, then the hours I need to spend on the business and in the business should be on creating impact and change.
Yes.
And so my question is, the way that I phrase it is, what are you doing with that time? I guess it's almost like if you're going on a diet. People say, oh, I eat okay. I'm really good with my food. And then you say, write down everything that you eat each day. And after a week, they realize, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't be doing in there. And then you start to make the change. If you did the exact same thing with your hours of the day and said, okay, for 1 week, I want you to write down every task that you're doing. So, and then what I want to ask is, what are the tasks that you have to do? And what are the tasks that someone else could do with a little bit of training? And what tasks are not dependent on you actually doing that you still do because it's habit, because you feel safe, because it's your procrastination task. I don't know if you have those. They're the tasks that you keep because you're like, oh no, I need to do that because it makes me feel so important, or because I don't really want to do the important stuff. So I go back to my procrastination tasks. For me, that's cleaning my office. For me, that's reorganizing stuff. I always have some procrastination stuff that I do when I want to, oh no, I'm so busy. Oh, let me go do something over here. Yeah. They're the things that you want to plan. If you look at what your diary says and go, oh, wow, actually, for my 60 hours or 40 hours a week that I thought I was so busy, 10 hours is just me filling time. So hang on, can someone else fill that stuff for me? And then what would happen if I had 10 hours back? Can you imagine what you could do with 10 hours of productive client-facing or delivery work a week? That's huge. That's a huge... An average coach. Let's just go anyone on the call, an average and your mid to range coach. Let's round it up, $200 an hour. Round it to an easy number, $200 an hour. You have 10 hours of productive work available a week. That's $2,000 a week that you can get back as an opportunity cost. And how much does it cost to hire a new person? For most cases, it's not $2,000 a week. So that's the way that we have these discussions, because it has to work for you, but you have to be brave. You have to be like, I'm just going to do it. I need to grow my business, or you don't. But if you want to, then you need to make those sacrifices to some extent and feel a bit of pinch.
I just had a discovery call with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about all these different opportunities. She's just about to launch this new business, which is a clothing brand.
Awesome.
Everything I was saying to her was freaking her out. She's like, but I don't want to sell that many pieces. I don't want to be that busy. I don't really, no, I'm scared. I don't want to put it out on social media because what if I sell out? And it was so intriguing to me. What do you mean, what if you sell out? Do you actually want that stuff sitting there and not moving because you're scared of doing the next run of it, for example, you know? So it was an intriguing way for me to think about someone going into business is actually, I don't really want to sell too much and I don't really want to grow. It's like, so what are you actually doing this for? Are you doing it because it's fun to design clothing, or are you doing it because you actually want to have a business that's sustainable, profitable eventually, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. And that's that hobby business discussion, isn't it? I mean, we had that when we run the Business Owners Mastermind. It's one of the very first conversations we have is, do you want a hobby that gives you some money on occasion that you can float in and out of, that if it grows, it grows, if it doesn't, it doesn't, and I'm happy because I get enough money to pay my bills and do my thing, but I can also still go on holiday for a month if I want to because it doesn't matter? Or do you want a business which requires consistency, repeatability, and sustainability?
Yeah.
And so that's the difference, is it's that shift, and it's a mindset shift to say, I love what I'm doing. But people think, and I have so many people that I still talk to and say, oh, I don't want to run a business, it's too much work. I'm like, you're killing yourself for someone else at the moment doing something that you don't like. And you have this amazing idea about doing something that you love, that you do really well, that if you actually committed to, you'd get better impact, greater impact for yourself, your community, and your family, without having to do it for someone else. Really? And they're like, oh, that's that kind of mindset shift of how do we move from hobby to business? And that's part of that growth. That's that question too, is when is it time to grow? We're talking about new staff, but when is it time to grow is also about saying, when is it time for me to go from being a hobby to maybe a sole trader, to maybe a company, to maybe a chain of companies or a group of companies? That they're all individual growth conversations that decide how are we showing up and what impact do we want to make in the business.
This company one has been coming up a lot of late in different work parts of things that I'm doing. Now, I know I was very slow to the party with becoming a company, and it was largely around fear, etc. And of course, as soon as you do it, it's like, actually.
Yeah.
The only thing for me was it was far bigger job actually than I had ever realized, and also it cost me a whole lot more because of having to set up a whole new zero, and you know, there was just a whole lot more involved than I had really been even advised on, I think. But what worries me, Jenni, now that I've done it, is how many people aren't doing it and are actually being advised not to. And isn't it correct that once you're hiring staff, you really have to do it? You've got a whole lot of issues behind the scenes. And so it worries me that, you know, people I've been talking with have already got staff members and yet are still being advised not to become a company yet.
It's actually a really pertinent conversation because we have a common client that we've had that conversation with, and they're being advised not to do it. And my response is, can I get you another advisor just to have a conversation with, to see their thoughts? And often it's about the transition and worried about the transition. But for me, I guess I decided to become a company from literally the day I opened my doors. I had no income, I had no clients, but I thought it's about my intention for what I want to do. This is my long-term goal. This is the asset that I'm building for myself and my family. And it's like saying, I'm going to build a house, but I'm going to build the foundations of sticks. And then eventually when we get big enough and my family grows big enough, I'll put some concrete down. Doesn't work. You have to go and build a whole new house. So I'm very much about, what is the intention you're trying to build? If you want to build a sustainable business, then start the business off right by putting in a structure that fits that long-term plan, not where you are now. And that goes with staff as well. Like when I was at a pinch point when I first hired my first VA, and I was like, oh, should I, shouldn't? And then literally within 1 week of hiring the VA, my brain went, why didn't I do this 6 months ago? Because I'd been saying I needed more time, I needed the support. But what we forget is that growth stage actually creates space and expansion. It doesn't actually make it, so it's that fear factor of what happens if you push the edges. You know what happens? The edges grow. They don't shrink, they don't confine you. And people often think company structures confine you, but it actually then gives you space in your company to then grow your business, to grow, because now you're protected. Now you can take a little bit more risk. because actually you and your family are protected from what happens in the company. And then it's not going to be you and your entire business, your whole home on the line. You can have separation between your personal stuff and your business things, and it gives you permission to take more risk because the risk to your family is lower.
I love that. And what do you feel like is the biggest, what would be the biggest fear issue for you? Well, like for me, for example, taking on my first team member as a full-time team member. Before that, I hired subcontractors and VAs here in Australia, and just had different team members. I'm talking with Hello Media. I had staff before with Rainbows and Clover, but with Hello Media. And one of the things that I was nervous about was not so much having enough work, but definitely from the money aspect, but B, I was really nervous about sharing passwords and things. So that really, if someone had just said to me at the time, oh, you don't even need to worry about that, just use LastPass, I'll be like, oh, okay. I also was worried about my time because I was so busy that I wouldn't have time for team meetings and to help them and guide them. But actually, it's just investing that time initially to get a system and processes set up. And then obviously it's a whole lot of smooth sailing after that. Well, not always smooth sailing, but What do you think for you? What was the big fear that stopped you initially?
I actually think I didn't give it enough space and consideration, to be honest. It was just, I'll get a VA once because I thought, and I've always been that person who keeps everything in my head and I can do it all. And I've always had that I can manage. So it's the attitude of I can manage. And so I'd never given it consideration. And so many people who go into business have that it's that alpha mentality of I can do it all. I'll save the world. I'll make it all happen. I don't need support to do it. But if you want to give me some, cool, but I'm actually okay. And it's actually, so because of that, I didn't consider the value that it would add to my business by saying now is the right time. And so that's in the last month, like we've gone literally from Macy to now Brian and now probably Kelsey in the space of 2 weeks, because just having Brian, I was like, oh, I can give them all these things. And now with the idea of Kelsey going, oh, actually, now I can give all this stuff. So now that I have this team, I'm realizing the amount of space I'm going to get back because I'm considering what I'm doing with my time. I don't have to work till 11 p.m. every night. I can actually give some of that work to someone else and we can all have an evening with our family. I don't have to do that work. So until you actually take the time to consider what you're doing and consider how you're spending your time, it will always feel like it's too hard or I can do it or I don't need them. And I think that's the piece. We don't give that space. And that, my favorite word is clarity. That's what it is. It's clarity about understanding what you do with your time, where your value is. And then look at your team and say, what value are they going to add to my business? Like I look at Macy. Macy supports so many, and I know your team with Honey and Merlin support your clients so well that sometimes they're having conversations with your client that you don't even really need to know about. And you're like, wow, this is a whole part of my business that I didn't even expect. But the value that they're getting and the clients now get is so much greater because you've given them the opportunity, both your team and your clients, to have different conversations rather than just with you.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything that you've said there. I think it's so important. One of the things for me, and I think it's interesting for across any sector that you're in or any industry that you're in. For example, with my husband, with employing carers, he often will find over the years it's better for him to employ the carers that have no experience and he can do the training exactly in the way he needs it, because one quad to another quad, just because they both have the same injury, they don't like things done the same. Yeah. So finding a person that's adaptable to be the way you need them to be in that role is super important. So we've found with our most recent hire, she actually doesn't have the experience of the things that we really, really need, but she's got the attitude and the ethos and all these things that are important to us. And we've learned over time, do we hire on skill or do we hire on all the other little bits and pieces about coming in and being the right team member? So we're taking a risk this time so that we're actually doing the training up ourselves, and we hope that it's going to, be awesome. But yes, so important. And I've certainly learned over the years, I had Australian VAs before, and I'm sure that this was just a particularly bad experience, but with both of them, they just were not very good at self managing and time management and all that. So if I gave a 2-week time frame for something to be completed by, 3 weeks later, I'm still chasing it up and getting super stressed because the client's ready and blah, blah, blah. It was really, really tricky. So, but I found, with my new team, everybody knows what the expectations are. Everybody knows what the deadlines are, et cetera. And we just make it happen and make it work. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Then employing on skill or employing on attitude.
And we've had this chat before, and I'm always about employing on attitude and who they are as a person. Because when you look at skill, you're looking at past performance. You're actually looking at what they have done before. It doesn't actually give you a reflection of what they can do in the future. So often we spend so much time looking at resumes and looking at experience, but it's a lag measure in what happened back in the past. And if they're still doing that same thing, they're possibly not growing. So my question is always, what can they do? What are they willing to do? How are they going to go under pressure or with a different environment if I throw a completely different task at them? And even with Brian, when we've just hired Brian, my conversation with Macy was, I like all of them, but who do you like? Who can you work with? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter necessarily that some of the others could have had better skill. It's a web role, so for me, it's all much for muchness. But ultimately, it comes down to who's Macy want to connect with, because she's the one that's going to be managing them. So for me, as a leader, as a manager of an organization, I need to say, well, how do I use my resources to the best of my ability? And all the decisions don't have to be made by me. And that's the biggest shift, I think, to the passwords, to what you can do, to building trust. It's recognizing that to be a leader of your company or your business or your hobby, you don't actually have to make all the decisions. Somebody else can do that. What you need to do is provide the guidance, the training, the support, and the culture and the community that makes them feel comfortable to do that, because then they will give you more than you expected. Then they will grow, and then they will want to be part of the growth of your business because you're giving them space to learn and develop as well, and not just being that micromanager that I see so many people with remote staff do. They become micromanagers and they have to tell them, I want it done like this and this and this and this and this. I'm like, that. We're not robots. People aren't robots. Until you hire an AI to be your virtual assistant or be your assistant, you can't expect it to be done in exactly the same way as you do it.
I think you've summed it up so beautifully. You really have. And I do a fair bit of micromanaging myself, actually, but particularly around content. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact, for me personally, being a writer and it being a really important part of my whole life, really, from my very, very early days, is that grammar and sentence structure and all of that sort of stuff is very important. Now, I know someone that is part of his company is about getting VAs for other people, but all of his posts, he's not actually editing them at all. So his VAs are writing it. English is not their first language. And I read this stuff and I think, wow, so that's an interesting way to be putting it out there. So I feel like depending where your staff are from will be depending on, and also depending what is important for you as your company culture and the words that you're putting out there, etc. So your level of micromanaging or level of managing in general will be different, I think, for every situation.
I completely agree. And content and me and language is such an important part, because I view language as part of the structure of your company. And the words you do, that's actually part of your business structure. It's not just stuff that gets put out. It forms an integral part of your business. What I've done, though, is because I've got someone like, I guess, with the VAs that I have with Macy, is she's been with me so long now. She knows the language, she knows the style. So I can now say to Macy, can you draft an email for me? And I'll check it. And because she's watched how we've talked, we've engaged, she's seen the post, she's seen what we've done on the website, the content that comes out is pretty well sounds like me, and I only need to tweak it. So it's about building that trust, and you get to a point where you know that the company language has become so ingrained in the way that we do our work, then somebody can do some of those things for you. And I think that's the point, is recognizing at what point do you go from it's only my language to it's the company language. And when you can evolve your language from an individual to a company language, that's when you're actually able to inspire and engage more people, but also your employees, because they actually feel like their language is part of the company as well.
Absolutely. I think that's beautifully said. I really do. So what do you think for next week about a topic being all about language?
Can we? Oh my God, content and languages. You know how much I love talking about words. I could talk about words all day. Yes, please. But before we just talk, I just want to talk about we had a comment on the Facebook talking from Ronelle, she's constantly having conversations with herself about, is this task something that someone else could do for me? And I think that's a really great question to ask, Ronelle, is even if you don't think you're ready to go to a VA or get some more staff, always ask yourself, is the task you're doing at the moment something that you could give to somebody else? Because at the point when you feel like you're comfortable, you're ready to take that leap, or your cash flow is in a position where you can, you actually already have a list of all the things you're going to give them. Instead of having that, well, what do I do now? Is asking yourself all the time, can someone else do this for me? Is there a better way for me to use my time? Such great questions to ask to enable you to actually, when you're ready to grow, when you're ready to lean in and have that courage, you'll have a list of things ready to go, and then they will hit the ground running, and you will feel so much relief and freedom with your time.
I totally agree with that. I've been in a lot of agreements with you today, Jenni.
I know we need to have a conversation where there's like a debate. Maybe we need to do bite-sized debates next time.
Yeah. So my suggestion would be have a little notebook that is called jobs to hand over. So
I like it.
Yet, but you have your notebook beside you. So you've just done a task and you're like, actually, I could have handed that one over. So then you're quite quickly building something pretty big, so that when you're ready to start the process of, what will this actually look like for me, you've actually got a whole book full of what you can be handing over.
I'm actually going to do that. I have my little remarkable. I've got a page now I've just set up while you said that. It's called Jobs to Let Go.
Yeah, Jobs to Let Go. That's beautiful.
Awesome. And so the language next week.
That sounds beautiful. So, Jenni, how can people get in touch with you?
So at Elephant in the Room AU on Insta and Facebook are the easiest places to find me. Pop that into Google and all the rest of our links will come up. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, website, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're across all of them. So reach out, have a chat. But at Elephant in the Room AU.
Beautiful.
And how about you, Kylie?
hellomedia.team and all the different places. And we've unfortunately just had to start a new Facebook page. So Hello Media.
Oh, and like the new Facebook page, people. Go and follow, like the new Facebook page.
So annoying. I'm hoping still eventually that I get my own personal Facebook back, that they take me out of permanent ban and block. And then we'll be able to, so the issue was with the Hello Media Facebook page is that we're all admins of it, but the disappearing Kylie Mowbray-Allen Facebook account was the owner of it. Yes. So it's it's just an endless debacle. It's almost 2 months now, and still every few days there's more problems associated with it. So the key is make sure you follow all the Facebook rules. You don't go against community guidelines. And my top tip is don't give anybody access to your personal Facebook, because that's why it happened to me.
Yes, so really great tip.
Many of us do it, but don't.
I think next week, let's talk about language, but the week after, let's actually talk about some of those Facebook community rules. Can we do that? I think talking about, because we all live it, we talk about the value of Facebook and all the other platforms. And I think it's a really good conversation to have, to basically do some sort of top 5 tips to remember when using Facebook around the community guidelines, because most people don't even know they exist. Most people, they just go on Facebook and do the thing until someone goes, oh no, don't do that anymore. Or you get like you and you get banned because they think you're doing something wrong. So let's talk next week language, and then the week after, I think it's all about Facebook community engagement rules.
Beautiful. I think that's a wonderful idea, and I look forward to those 2 Fridays coming up. And Jenni, you enjoy your beautiful public holiday.
I will. I've got a couple of meetings as always, but we're going to try and spend some time with the family, which I'm really excited about.
Magic. You have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching.
All right. Bye.
Bye.